Hello, my name is Diane Putris, and my topic for my ED601 class will be classroom management, students impacted by trauma. I'd like to start off by just thinking about and discussing what classroom management is. Classroom management is defined as the process by which teachers and schools create and maintain appropriate behavior of students in classroom settings. No matter how many trainings, professional developments, teacher observations we attend, once we get into the classroom, that's when we actually are within our own student groups. Our personal philosophy begins to take over, and that's when we start focusing on enhancing student learning and engagement. Cajon Valley Union School District, the school district I work for, focuses on taking the time for social and emotional learning. According to researchers such as Susan Ward-Roncalli, the brain's neuroplasticity makes it possible for repeated experiences to shape the brain and even reverse the effects of chronic stress. Now, that related to my topic that I really want to discuss here is trauma that some of our students deal with and how it affects them on a daily basis, especially in a school setting. So what is trauma? Traumatic events are external, but they quickly become incorporated into the mind and the body. Trauma can also be community violence, domestic abuse, sex trafficking, serious medical illness, natural disasters, neglect, physical abuse, displacement and refugee trauma, school violence, sexual abuse, terrorism, loss of a loved one, traumatic grief, and psychological mistreatment. According to the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, a national survey was given to students the ages of 12 to 17 years old, and they revealed that 39% reported witnessing violence, 17% reported physical assault, and 8% of that age group experienced a lifetime of sexual assault. So where does trauma fit into management? Understanding that trauma is not just about acquiring knowledge, it's actually about changing the way we view the world. According to psychiatrist Sandra Bloom, it's about changing our language when we speak with our students and in the classroom to questions from what's wrong to what happened to you. When that comes to my philosophy, my personal philosophy has always been focusing on building relationships, trust, and a safe environment for all of my students through high-level activities that challenge my students and that allow them to become proud of their work. This cannot be accomplished without expectations in my classroom, setting the routines, and the adaptability. It's also crucial to instill the importance of empathy and appreciation. Linda Albert, who wrote the theory for classroom management, her theory and research is all about creating an environment where students feel they belong. She states in her research a theory called the 3 C's, making students feel that they are capable, helping the students connect with others, and assisting them with making contributions. This really connected to my philosophy as a teacher, so I really enjoyed reading her 3 C's. So one way that I make that connection is I do something called community circles in my classroom. We try to do it about once a week, and this helps me build the 3 C's. My philosophy is centered on my true belief that my classroom should be a safe and welcoming environment for my students. They feel that they belong in my classroom, and it's just as much theirs as it is mine. I often avoid saying my class or welcome to my class. It's always our class. I use the language like we're a second family. Let's back each other up just like you would your family at home. And I feel like that helps me really implement the 3 C's in my own classroom. As a member of the instructional leadership team at my school, we have been given the opportunity, we meet about a couple times a month, and we work directly with one another to administer with other colleagues, with administrations in my school. And we discuss ways our staff can gain knowledge on how to best accommodate our students and understand kind of where they're coming from and how their traumatic experiences affect their actions. As a team, we decided to go ahead and study the book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Dr. Perry. This book was written by Dr. Perry, who is a renowned psychiatrist, and what he does is he reveals how trauma affects children, and he outlines the path to recovery. Every member of our staff received a book, and what we do at our professional developments and throughout some of our meetings is we study different chapters, and we have discussions, and we kind of relate the chapters to our students in our school and how we can use some of his experience and some of his unbelievable knowledge of traumatic experiences in our own classrooms. So what I'd like to focus on the rest of my presentation is chapter 3, which is called Stairway to Heaven, and I'd like to focus on that when I talk about connecting trauma to classroom management. A couple quotes that really stood out to me in chapter 3, some things that Dr. Perry wrote that really stood out to me were one that he tells a story of an extremely traumatic situation that he was called on to help with, and that was the situation in Waco, Texas, which is referred to as the Davidian children situation. Many people have heard of it. It was all over the news. This situation was under the cult leader of a man named David Koresh. He had men, women separated. What he did was he isolated students, kids, and adults from food due to specific behaviors. One quote that he really mentioned that really stood out to me in chapter 3, as I have here, is he gives his advice to the mental health agencies called on to serve the Branch Davidian children. And he says that one thing that should be done when dealing with these students who have dealt with incredibly traumatic situations is to create consistency, routine, and familiarity. That means establishing order, setting up clear boundaries, and improving cross-organizational communities. So we talk about ways that we do that in our classroom. Just because we don't have students who dealt with something as traumatic as what happened in Waco, Texas, there are students in our classroom who have their own trauma. And we talk about ways that we can, what we can do in the classroom to make sure that there is some kind of stable environment for those students. One way to implement that advice into a classroom in the community I work in is to connect, protect, respect, and reinforce. This can be done through focus on relationships, promote safety and trustworthiness, engage in collaboration, and encourage building skills. Simply put, just loving each child and truly getting to know who they are would help with kind of easing that trauma that they've been through. Another piece of advice, I guess I could say, or his experience that he shares in chapter 3 was when he says that, in fact, the research on the most effective treatments to help children, trauma victims, might be accurately summed up this way. What works best is anything that increases the quality and number of relationships in this child's life. It's important to think about the impact that this has on a one-size-fits-all approach that many organizations take when working with children that have experienced trauma. So when I think about that in my school and in my classroom, we try very hard to ensure, I know personally with my 6th grade team, we all get together and we talk and we discuss ways that we can implement some strategies to help our students who have dealt with trauma. So we try really hard to ensure routine in the classroom, and that way the children know exactly what's to be expected in my classroom when they come in every single day. In this reading, Dr. Perry also hits on the importance of maintaining a routine for children of trauma so that they can have some normalcy and they know what to expect. I feel like my routines aid in my relationships with my students. Students become comfortable with the routines and therefore become comfortable in the classroom. They feel it's a safe place, and many students eventually open up. They ask questions, both lesson related and personally related, and life questions, and they tell me stories, and this is just signs that they're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable in the classroom. If students don't feel comfortable necessarily talking to me in this classroom, they know there's a trusted adult in this building, just because we make sure to work together really closely and discuss all of our strategies to help students who have dealt with trauma. One last thing that Dr. Perry mentions in chapter 3 is this section where he talks about kind of like self-care and our role as a teacher. He says, the moods and actions of those around us are contagious, especially those of the perceived leader of the group. This has countless implications. Most relevant are those of the people charged with working with students that have experienced trauma. We talked about this at our staff, one of our staff meetings. We talked about the importance of self-care for educators. Employee self-care is essential for us teachers who are tasked with working with students that have experienced trauma. We have to ask ourselves very important questions. How can we become the best versions of ourselves to be the best for our students? The steps our organization can take to assist with this is making sure all teachers and staff members often self-regulate and operate from a position of strength to help our students. In addition, self-care must increase in order to be able to service these students who really need us. For example, doing things like meditating, surrounding ourselves with positive energy, getting good sleep, just kind of taking better care of ourselves will assist in helping our students who really need that positive mentor. So something our staff members were encouraged to do is sign up for a program called Headspace. And it helps focus on the essentials of like meditating and mindfulness, and gives us random exercises depending on kind of where you are. And so we all signed up for that as a staff, and we just kind of on our own time, when we want to, get onto that to that website and pick something that we want to challenge ourselves with for that day. If we're feeling tired, if we're feeling a little depressed, if we're feeling a little lonely, if our spunk is just not there, there's different categories you can choose from on that website called Headspace, and just kind of allows us to do some breathing and meditating exercises to get us back on to become the best versions of ourselves we can be. This is really an important topic for me because I work in a community that definitely services students with trauma, and understanding the connection between students with trauma and how I manage my classroom is incredibly crucial for anyone who works really in my district. At Cajon Valley Union School District, approximately 800 of our students are refugees. In just Cajon Valley Middle School, we have 932 students. And in El Cajon altogether, 33.8% of the students live in poverty in this community. So as you can see, so many different categories of trauma can be faced with just trauma with just being a refugee and living a life of poverty. Thank you for listening.